How do we determine what is something to note as a red flag and like, I have to be out of this relationship, or something that's just like, wow, no, I just really had this person on a pedestal, which gave no room for them to be anything but perfect. And again, perfect defined by what my brain is deciding they should be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm one of your co-hosts, Keely C. Helmick.
I'm your other host, Melissa DeSegurant.
Welcome. It's so nice to be back. Melissa and I got a couple weeks break, which for those listening who are of the creative persuasion, understand that taking a week off is really important. Taking time off as a creative person is really important and really can help bring that spark back, that new ideas and creativity flow.
Yeah, it feels much different. So I'm grateful. That's part of our agreement as podcasters is that we rest and take time off, all of us.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing to me. Some of these podcasters just like pump out week and week and week and week and week and good for them. But yeah, we're going to continue to take sporadic time off so that we can look for the longevity of it and not burn ourselves out and have no new ideas left. Well, as always, before I get started with updates, which I feel like half of this episode could be updates, but
Yeah.
my name is Keely C. Helmick. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I use they, them pronouns, owner of Connective Therapy Collective. I'm queer, non binary, white, femme, and super, 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 super duper single. It just single, just solo, solo single.
Yeah. And I'm Melissa DeSegurant. I'm licensed as a marriage and family therapist and professional counselor. I'm white, able bodied, I'm bisexual, polyamorous, and I am gender fluid. I use she and they pronouns.
Yay.
And
Well,
I'm in relationship. I am no longer solo, which is so weird.
we
It's like, what
swapped.
happened?
We swapped.
What happened?
We
We
swapped.
did. Yeah,
We both got out of our comfort zones.
it's true.
Springtime. As you were doing your intro, Melissa, it'll be a couple weeks old by the time this comes out, but I was just thinking about all the erasure. We're finding out all these queer shows aren't coming back. And when I was doing
Mhm.
a little sing song, I was like, oh gosh, are we gonna get canceled? Because after the L word did their little musical, it's not up for a fourth season.
I know.
The L word.
I'm sad. Yeah. Yeah. The generation Q.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, and like representation is so important. And so I think that one of the things that I really value us doing this is no matter how many people are listening, is that we are putting out queer content in the world when in Hollywood and these shows being canceled and having some really part of it is relying too much on cliches of the queer community and these specific character stereotypes. I think we're here to squash that as much as possible or talk
yeah.
about the availability of so many ways queer people can show up in the world and
Yep.
how and so many ways queer joy is expressed and experienced. But let's do some updates. Let's get into updates before we really dive into the topic.
Uh, I can update.
Yes,
As
update.
always, I thought about it beforehand. And as always, I'm like, so what are my updates? It's not for lack of thinking. Yeah, springtime has hit the Pacific Northwest. I feel it. We've had a lot more access to light and sunshine, and that has been amazing. Like, that's been very needed for me. So I'm doing really well. I've been busy, both professionally and personally. There's a lot going on. Relationships are going super well, and not just romantic sexual relationships, but also connections with friends and like networking. Like that word is just not one that I've been friends with for a very long time. And I think that's in part due to a pandemic, in part due to having gone through grad school, to be a therapist and then the whole licensure track, like that's just a lot of energy. And then also prior to moving to the Pacific Northwest, I was in a position where I was moving to a new place every single year. So to really sink in and develop community and connections wasn't part of my agenda. So it's really different, to be here in the Pacific Northwest for now a longer period of time. I think my system has finally realized I'm staying.
Oh, yeah.
It's taken a while to feel settled, and, like, now I'm starting to realize, like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not leaving, so let's, like, connect with some folks."
Awesome.
So, that's been my big focus, I think. Yes, relationship with self as always, but with that, a lot more time with friends and community.
That's awesome. Yeah, my update is I was traveling for a little bit, and right now I have taken my hiatus from dating apps. I have a friend who we are talking about maybe getting back on them strategically, having a fun afternoon to take photos and think about how I wanna present myself,
Yeah.
going back into the dating thing after a little break. I was debating whether to have this as a queer joy, but I don't it's kind of a melancholy thing, and so I'm gonna bring up something different for queer joy, but to start the topic of the day, what inspired the topic of the day was this idea of how we put people on pedestals and how we react or what happens with
Yeah.
real life, and many listeners and many friends and people in my life know I have talked about Ashley Gavin for years, over 2.5 years. Like, she started a podcast, she was just getting her career started, chat a little bit on DMing on Instagram, all that fun stuff, and I have waited for 2.5 years to see her live. I listen to her podcast religiously, and had quite an interesting experience, and I the experience was being really excited to be there, seeing her, and then during her set, I was one of her people that got roasted, and wha I am still kind of figuring out how I feel afterwards, but what I noticed is this idea of putting someone on a pedestal. I don't know her really personally, but I feel
Mhm.
like I do because I listen to her podcast. She's very vulnerable on her podcast, but her personality on stage is totally different.
Right.
She
Yeah.
almost doesn't seem like the same person.
Totally. It's a
So
character.
she's
Yeah.
a character. Yes, she's a character. And so I got roasted. And at first I was like, oh, like I got attention. And I was like, what the hell? Like, I put this person on such a pedestal that I was okay with negative attention that didn't feel good. And so, as I'm sorting out whatever that means for myself, made me think about how within when we first meet somebody, or maybe we just connect on a dating app or have seen somebody and don't really know them yet, what is that like? And how do we talk about that? Because when that transition hits where you're like, "Oh, they're a real person."
Right. Yeah, and even when we say that, it's often like, "Ooh, I saw a part that it didn't feel so good." Like, that's what we associate with, like, the being a real person is like, "Oh, no, now I felt something different than all these wonderful, loving feelings I felt initially when this person was on a pedestal."
Yeah, like we talk about this idea, we use the phrase rose-colored glasses, and when something when something doesn't feel great, NRE wears off, or you mentioned earlier, Melissa, you were saying before we hopped on to recording, even putting, like, therapists or mentors, even outside of dating, how do we come to terms when and just recognize people for human beings that say shitty things sometimes and
Yeah.
aren't always quote unquote perfect. And I think, yeah, so kind of dive into that. And what do you think, Melissa? I mean, when you what did I just hear? When I was at a conference and Tammy Nelson, who is a sex and relationship therapist, a certified sex therapist, does a lot, written some books around non-monogamy. And I remember her just recently saying in the workshop I saw that NRE can last anywhere. What'd she say? Like 3 to 20 months? It's like
Mm.
the range.
Yeah, it is.
But I'm trying to think of an example, but when people like when a NRE, when the transition from NRE or when the NRE stops, I think sometimes people actually break up after that. Like
Sure.
don't
Yeah.
transition
Yeah.
past NRE.
Yeah.
Hey, hey, it's Cardinal, your behind the scenes buddy. My daily dose of impossible expectations used to be on Instagram, but now I follow cool people like body liberationists and pleasure activists and otherwise radically diverse humans that aren't afraid to show themselves, the good and the bad. I like to imagine that we're somewhere with those people. You can follow us on Instagram at Queer Relationships Queer Joy for more realness in your feed. And if you ever see a way we can improve, have a topic suggestion, or want to share your queer joy, our DMs are always open. All right, back to the show.
Sometimes what we're identifying is this, oh, they're human, like something has happened. There's something that you didn't like or that you saw that, I don't know, felt problematic. How we can get in this place. It's like, how do we tell between like red flags, and then just someone, again, being human and being somebody who is not perfect and does make mistakes and does, potentially even hurt people because we do, right? Like on accident sometimes, but we cause harm to people sometimes. So, how do we determine what is something to note as a red flag and like, I have to be out of this relationship? Or something that's just like, wow, no, I just really had this person on a pedestal, which gave no room for them to be anything but perfect. And again, perfect defined by what my brain is deciding they should be.
Yeah, like what's being reflected. And even I just someone today and on a professional level, I was talking to someone who was like, "Oh my gosh, when I saw your TikTok," and I was like, "What?" Like they're like, "When I saw your TikTok and you were talking about finding a therapist who wears docs," and I'm like, "This was a 15-second clip that got for that minute, for that week or whatever on TikTok got this attention." And I'm thinking, whoa, like, do you actually know me? And like, where do we give ourselves? I even think about like, how does this set us up to be scared to be vulnerable? Because if we are putting people on pedestals, or if I'm in a dating situation and the person just sees all the greatness that I am, but then when do you talk about having a bad day or 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 whatever it is? Like,
Yeah, like
what are the
like saying that it doesn't actually feel good to be put on a pedestal because then it feels like, oh God, well, what happens when I do something that you don't like? Is this image you have of me gonna come crashing down and then I'm gonna have to feel bad that I'm not, again, perfect? It feels like it comes back to so much perfectionism in a way.
a lot of perfectionism, and I think it and I know we've talked about this a lot, but going back to thinking about social media and how we compare or see images, examples of relationships when we if we're on Facebook or I know I age myself when I say Facebook, but when we're on Instagram and see all these clips, I follow this photographer who does all of these like dancing with her and dancing with them, where they do these amazing wedding photos or like relations, like they photograph these couples and then have these little snippets of their stories. And you're just like, oh my God, it's so cute. And it's so sweet. And it's so lovely. And you see this snippet of this moment in their lives and just think, wow, look at how great they have it.
Yeah, it's dangerous to assume that's the whole story, right? And assume that people's social media presence is always congruent with who they are in the world outside of social media. And I think you mentioned this earlier. This is a piece important to me as a therapist is for our listeners to understand therapists are also not perfect. Do not put us on a pedestal. I've had family members in the middle of like an argument be like, "You're a therapist. You should know better." And like, wow, if you wanted to say the thing that was going to really piss me off, like that was it.
The
Because I'm
phrase,
like, I'm
yeah.
human. I am judgmental too. Damn it. And I'm not your therapist right now. I am not holding space for you. Anywho, but I mean, this is part of the reason my like handle, thank you for those of you who follow me on Instagram, license WIP. Like there's no part of me that feels like, wow, what a genius handle. That's gonna pull people in. It's really just a reflection that, like, as a clinician, if I'm gonna have any kind of presence, and we've said this on the podcast too, if I'm gonna have community presence, I have to be human. And for me, I have to be a work in progress. I can't really own that expert thing. And part of this is my training as a clinician. But yeah, like I am not perfect. And in fact, I think I was having a conversation with a client today about this pedestal idea. And I mean, think about how we put emotions on a pedestal. And like we talk about emotional regulation all the time in
Oh
sessions.
my
And people
gosh.
then assume that means we're saying you should be regulated at all times.
Yes, yes.
And if you're not, that means you're doing something wrong and you're not coping well enough or you're not. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Let's not put anything on a pedestal here. And believe me, I too go outside of my window of tolerance. I too become dysregulated at times. This is normal. This is part of being human.
Yes, and it's not about not dysregulating, it's how when you are having that intensity and you're outside of your window of tolerance, how do you come back into yourself?
Right.
How do you find that you regulate? How do
Right.
you take those breaks or pause all those pieces? And in reflecting and thinking about like a new relationship or being more of a and I'm using this word like being human, but I think it's like these moments of being vulnerable and showing these pieces. In IFS, internal family systems, we talk about these different parts of self. Uh, in Jung terms, we talk about the shadow self and
Right.
embracing the shadow side of ourself. And this idea in all of these different therapeutic models, there's this idea of integration and being open to all of our parts. And so when we're showing someone else our parts, our other parts. What is that like? Do
Mhm.
that and look at someone else too, because we are also responsible for not putting people on pedestals.
Right. Right.
Sorry, Ashley, I put you on a pedestal. But
Yeah.
how do we and I am not that person and I'm being so vulnerable right now because I wasn't a person to have, like, crushes on celebrities, and I wouldn't even say that I had a crush on Ashley, it's more like I just it was this representation that I just had never seen, and so I was like that teenager that was glomming on to this, "Oh my gosh, this person makes me laugh and is so funny and is talking about sex." Like, literally the first person outside of my circles to publicly listen weekly about someone talking about sex, and here I am as a sex therapist being like, "Oh my gosh, it's a queer person." 'Cause we can hear people talk about sex all day, every day. These, like, especially, like, white cis hetero women blah blahing about sex and
Mhm. Mhm.
all of their stuff that they talk about, and, like, it didn't match with me. So but when I think about, like, how we notice ourselves putting people on pedestals, "Okay, I did it. Okay, we do that sometimes." Then how do we rebound from that and be like, "Okay, moving forward," and not necessarily like, going back to you saying, like, NRE, like, if we have put somebody on a pedestal, not necessarily just cutting off the relationship, whether it's a mentor, a therapist, a celebrity, or a person we're dating, or a friend, but how do we really have compassion and look at all their parts of themselves and, like, still be open to having that connection, or what does that look like? To me, as we're saying this, it seems like that's really the opportunity to deepen the dynamic.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, and have a more authentic appreciation for someone and all of their parts and sides, and I think there's a piece here where the self-work then does again, as always, the self-work becomes important because if we're having difficulty accepting maybe shadow parts or other things that we hadn't seen in other people, is it because we can't do that for ourselves?
yeah.
Right? If we can't accept that we have different parts and we have different modes and we have shadow sides and all of this, then it becomes easier to accept that other people also do.
Yeah.
I think there's a part of the conversation too that like you gave a good example with Ashley Keeley in that she is exposed in different parts of her are exposed in her different mediums. And that's like another piece is sometimes we put someone on a pedestal because of the context in which we know them. And then we get to know them in a different context and it changes. So I've heard this from people who were like coworkers and they had this idea of like who this person was because they saw their work persona and who they are in that setting and then started dating and were like, "Wait a minute, like what happened? Like you were this, confident, assertive, whatever person and you're totally different romantically." And it's because a different part of this person is coming out. And that's kind of goes back to the thing about not putting therapists on a pedestal. Like, I'm not always in my professional holding space for everyone. God, I hope not. Holding space for everyone else mode, right? And so if somebody sees me and this is part of the discussion I have with clients, if you run into me in public, like you're going to see different sides of me that you don't get in a professional setting or context. So please don't assume that the context you're seeing me in is the only one I exist in.
And then that just, like you said, comes back to ourselves. Like if we are putting people on pedestals and then the pedestal crumbles, are we how are we reacting to that? And are we able to accept ourselves and all of our parts? And I don't think it's about, I mean, maybe once in a while it's this way. I don't think for the example we are going to be using today, I don't think there's forgiveness involved, but there is an interesting reflection of what was that serving in my life? Because really, me looking at this public figure, I was really projecting
Sure. Yeah.
whatever it is that I wanted. And for me, it was like, oh, it was this queer woman comedian who talked about sex and brought these guests on. And it was something I look forward to listen to once a week, to actually hear representation and hear people of all ages, genders, interests in sex, kinks, like all of this wide variety of folks talking about sex. And that
Mhm.
filled, and so as we're saying this, I'm like, well, she can still that's still part of my life, and maybe I just choose not to go to the live comedy shows anymore. Maybe
Mhm.
that isn't my thing, is that the way they are on the podcast is super awesome and great, but maybe their live show just isn't my cup of tea.
Sure. And that persona, their comedic character it's definitely different than, the person they are on the podcast.
Yes, they have a persona on stage, they have a character on stage, and cool, that's not necessarily for me.
Totally.
Going back to relationships and thinking about the dating process and that transition when the rose-colored glasses slip down or the pedestal crumbles, the NRE kinda moves through. I'm thinking about how we talk about that point, and you said earlier about, okay, is it NREs worn off? Is it a red flag or is it just
I
we're
mean, to your point, is it a projection? Is this
Yep.
something from a past relationship that you just got triggered and now you're projecting that onto somebody else?
Also, is NRE just a big projection with chemicals involved?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. 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 Yeah, and, like, again, what meaning are you making that you've seen this other side of this person? Looking into what are the assumptions you now have? what if you're like, what are your feelings? Like, gosh, we're therapists. What are the emotions? Are you feeling disappointed? Are you feeling betrayed? Are you
Yeah.
scared? Like, what is actually emotionally coming up for you now that these rose-colored glasses have slipped off?
Yeah, I mean, I felt yucky and kinda sad and kinda bummed.
The grief, that's part I mean,
So
gosh, when is
good.
grief not part of it? Because here's the thing is, like, I've actually in numerous sessions heard the same concept being talked about with past relationships. So people putting exes on pedestals and only remembering the positive parts, especially in moments
Mm.
of present day grief or
Yeah.
scarcity mindset or feeling like it's never gonna happen for me again. I had it so good when that person was in my life. And even if there was trauma or interpersonal violence involved, I've heard people be, saying things in therapy like, I know it was really bad. I know I'm supposed to be done with the relationship, but I can't let it go or I keep. And there is this element of putting that relationship or aspects of that person on a pedestal and then comparing all new people to them.
Yeah.
We do this. It's like, what is that for? I mean, safety or protection? Like, what is it that we are only fixated on these positive things or really fixated on seeking them out?
I mean, Melissa, it's interesting because then as we're saying this, I'm also hearing in the back of my mind people who have talked to me about going on dates and the first, second date person just disclosing too much. Like, almost
Mhm.
not wanting to appear perfect or
Oh, that shit, Keely, that's me. Okay, story time. Oh, wow, called out. So, you might know if you've listened to this podcast before, I use a lot of humor and trying to use less self deprecating humor because I've checked into like, where's that coming from for me? But this perfectly describes my first interactions with my long distance partner. And I called myself out on it. I was like, wow, I'm just sitting here naming all of the things that I think are weirdest about me, the things I feel least comfortable with in myself. And I'm just telling them to you because that's how I just put it all out there and then it's take it or leave it, right? Like if you don't like it, you get to leave and I have the satisfaction that I'm not hiding anything. But that's not like that is a fear-based strategy. That's not an empowered strategy. That's like a desperate, let me tell you all the things that you might want to like not date me for so that I can feel really secure if you do decide to date me.
well, this almost I'm not sure how I feel about what I'm about to say, but this is where it makes sense to me when people talk about having these first questions or having topics, not wanting to be superficial and just talk about the weather or talk about
Yeah.
sports, but there is this piece I'm thinking about, how do we approach all interactions with curiosity? And it seems like this interaction between curiosity and boundaries, like asking things, but recognizing that we don't have to disclose everything.
Yeah.
And in the I mean, I don't know what it's like in the straight community dating. I still hear some really funny stories of how people are like, "Oh, me and my friend didn't realize we dated the same person." It still happens in the straight community, but I think more so as the queer community is so small, even in Portland, Oregon, that there is something to be said about being aware about how much we're disclosing,
Mhm.
because once information is out there, then it's just out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do we navigate this? And even this word, so many words are overused that I cringe when I say them, but the word authentic or being present when we're in a new interaction or when we're talking to people and someone that we look up to or someone that we're interested in for whatever reason are drawn to in a way, creatively, mentor wise, romantically, sexually, that we notice that and not put someone on a pedestal. See who they really are. Like,
Mhm.
focus, be present, listen to them. Maybe this is advocating, I don't know what, maybe this is advocating don't look somebody up before you meet them in person. Don't look up their Instagram. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the thing. I when I was at the comedy club, somebody handed me their phone and had Instagram pulled up so that I would give them my Instagram handle instead of my phone.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know. I think this is an interesting question. I feel like people like listeners could definitely write in and talk about, the pros and cons of giving people your Instagram account,
Mhm.
of learning more about someone from the social media perspective before meeting in person. Do you meet in person
Right.
first?
Yeah.
Vet them out a little bit?
Right. And I think to some extent that's gotta be individualized for how each person works. Yeah, I mean, God, it's similar in therapy. Like, do you collaborate with the last therapist before or after you meet a client for a first session? Right? Like, do you want that information and their opinion first, or do you want to meet the person? And that's again, I'm going clinical, but I think that the point is whatever you choose to do, understand that whatever piece of information you're getting is only one piece of the puzzle. That's it. Like their Instagram persona is one piece. It's not the whole person,
Yeah.
you know. You may not even see all those parts of that person for a while, and so understanding that and you can start to form your, idea of who this person is, but understand you're never going to fully know.
And that's where that line of curiosity continues, and I think I'm slowly navigating when we talked about the NRE transition is when someone is moving out of that, like, really chemical inducing rose-colored glasses feeling, but still being curious about the person and
Mhm.
still having and I'm using curious, someone might say still interested, but there's, like, curiosity. I still really wanna get to know this person more, and that getting to know someone, seeing them for who they are and what they're doing in the world and what is going on internally for them, and creating that safe like, allowing them to have that space to talk about all those pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, and then on the other side of it, if you're if you're in the position like I disclose that I am, where I will fill in gaps maybe earlier than I need to for the sake of somebody not putting me on a pedestal, like, understand that it's okay that you're human. It's
Yeah.
totally fine. You don't need to disclose everything, that you're uncomfortable with about yourself, especially if it feels like it's an apology for not being perfect. Like, check into that. I'm calling myself completely out there, but it is okay. And if somebody does put you on a pedestal, that doesn't mean you've done something wrong or you haven't told them enough about all the terrible parts of you for them not to do that. It's like a natural thing that we're doing and we're trying to dismantle that. But also like you get to be human and that doesn't mean you have to disclose all of the uncomfortable things right away.
Yeah, for sure. So be curious and maybe notice you're projecting.
Just
And if
maybe.
you watch someone
Yeah.
on a pedestal right now, it's okay too.
Just know that's what you're doing, right? Awareness. Be aware. I am putting this person on a pedestal. That could come back to bite me later, but that's what it is right now. There are legitimately Achilles celebrities that I like hope not to meet because I would like to keep them in their imaginary spot in my mind where they are. I
Oh
don't want to
my
be
god.
disappointed.
Yeah, like you don't watch interviews, you don't want to I know it is interesting because we have this like wanting to know all this stuff, but then yeah. Oof.
I get that too because I'll say like celebrities I'm into and people are like, "Oh, well they did this and they do that." And I'm like, I'm Demi, like, I'm into the character they played, like, I don't know what to tell you, like, I'm sorry that they're a horrible person, I still love that character and I still connect, I don't know what to say, I'm sorry. Again, overly apologetic.
No, I can't even remember the actor's name, but, like, I don't ever wanna actually meet Shane.
Yeah.
Shane will just always be Shane in their perfect imperfection. She's just yep, whatever.
I, on the other hand, would love to meet Bet, so that would be great for me. Please.
I
Please.
love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, queer joy for the win today. I mean, I'm just going with the standard, and I know I've said this before, and I don't care because this pops up. Well, maybe not. Maybe I'll do a different queer joy. Okay, I will say my queer joy was traveling, and I'm gonna be honest, like, for the probably the past 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years even when I've traveled, unless I was partnered and monogamously partnered, like, when I travel by myself, I'll clarify, when I travel by myself, I often hit up Tinder. I've had some great, awesome adventures, and I've talked about those adventures in some of the episodes, especially last year at this time. But I specifically did not hit up Tinder and traveling. And though I had no hookups, I had so many interesting interactions that were sexually charged. I definitely had some good little flirty things. And let me tell you, one of the best parts was a very curious. I keep debating whether this person, and God, if she listens to the episode, oh my God, I don't even know if she'll look me up, but she was at the
You're
conference.
not on the pedestal anymore, Keely.
Well, I'm putting her on the pedestal.
Uh,
It was just this random occurrence where, like, of course, she like talked about her husband, but then she bought me a drink and talked to like her friends left and she talked to me for like 2 hours and this woman is absolutely gorgeous. And I was just like, "Oh my god. I get to just like chat with her." And then I definitely had other people just coming up and talking to me and there was yeah, got my flirt on, lots of real spontaneous in-person interactions. No hookups, but that's okay. No hookups.
it sounds like you still had some queer joy.
But tons of queer joy, flirting, and the thing about being at a conference like this that's so big is, like, we all were like, "Queers, where are the queers?" We're finding the other queer therapists and hanging out and making conversations, so it was
Yeah,
awesome.
amazing. Cool.
Alright, what's going on for you? What's your queer joy?
Oh, man. I know what it is. I made that sound as if I don't know what I'm about to say.
You're just so excited.
Um, I also haven't said it out loud though, and it's not that it's present moment emotionally charged, but, like, it was a really big deal that happened recently, so I'm gonna try not to be, as I say, long-winded. Sometimes I am with these, but, my queer joy came in a conversation with my parents, and I talk to my parents pretty regularly. I think more frequently than a lot of people would imagine, especially given that I am really challenging a lot of the way my parents do their life and my own lifestyle. So, I think it blows people's minds that, like, "Really? You talk to your family that often?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And, I had come out to them before I moved up here as both, bisexual, polyamorous, getting a divorce, like, moving, like, this was quite the conversation they sat through. And thankfully, I have parents who were able to really support me through that conversation. But since then, they know that I do reference that I date multiple people and that that's still a thing for me, but I don't give a lot of specifics about my dating life. In part just because that doesn't feel like it's ever been a part of our relationship until I'm dating someone like in a serious way that they need to integrate with my family.
Yeah.
Um and also in part because now I'm like dating non-monogamously and I don't want to have to keep them up to date on everything that's like, it just feels too chaotic for them to always know, like, week to week what's happening.
Yeah.
But that my dad showed some curiosity referencing that you're dating. So I ended up telling both my parents, like, some details about both of the people that I'm in relationship with, and
Oh.
with that also talked a lot about sexuality and gender and things like that, and they just listened, and they just nodded and were like, "Cool, thanks for sharing." Like, that was it, and God, that's huge. I just could never have imagined this a couple of years ago that I would be sitting there and being like, and I even named in that conversation that I'm like, "It's weird to talk to you about this because usually if I'm telling you a partner's name and, like, what they do and that kind of thing, it's because I'm on the relationship escalator and we're gonna move in, or, usually it's because 'cause we're, like, progressing in that way that my parents would be able to attach to.
Yeah.
And so I just named it. I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know if you'll ever meet these people, and I don't know if the relationship will progress in the way that you've seen other relationships of mine progress, but they're really important people in my life and I'd want you to know about them. So that was like, it was wonderful. And I feel so more, that's why I'm out. It just helps me feel really integrated and healthy and authentic, to use that word. So like, bravo to my parents, really. Bravo. That was well done and not easy for them. So I'm very lucky and very appreciative and filled with queer joy.
I love that. I love it. I love it. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you all for joining and listening. We still have upcoming workshops. Check out our website to see what's coming up next. We have the Lucy Fielding workshop. We also have a BDSM kink workshop, which will be having a BDSM kink episode soon before that workshop. Check us on Instagram, Facebook, and we hope you all have a queer and joyful week.
Thanks for listening to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy, a podcast by the Connective Therapy Collective, hosted by Keely C. Helmick and Melissa DeSegrand, with audio edited by me and Leigh Supapo Bernito. I'm your producer, Cardinal Marking. Intro music is by Bad Snacks. If this episode made you smile or think, tell us about it. If you hated it, tell us about that. Review us on iTunes or Spotify, or send us an email at media@connectivetherapycollective.com. For more queer joy, visit our Instagram at Queer Relationships Queer Joy, or our website www.connectivetherapycollective.com. Love ya. Bye.